Okay, so I did the first pass of the sanding, and I did it with a belt sander. And Zebrawood's a relatively hard wood, so you can kind of get away with the belt sander, but you're going to want to be real careful if you use a belt sander on wood, because it's pretty aggressive, and it will leave a little valley there that's almost hard to see with the eye, but it'll be there. So you want to keep that belt sander moving around at all times, but it does a lot of the heavy lifting for you as far as sanding goes. And then I'll break out the orbital sander and do the belt sander had 120 grit. I'll break out my orbital sander and do the 150 and then the finishing 220. But I'm just doing the rough sanding right now. What I'm trying to do is really get a look at the wood and see what it looks like. And let me show you what I'm looking for. So I'm looking for things like that. It's a little divot like that, areas like this, and you can see I've circled them all. Not imperfections in the wood by any means, just part of the wood. But on a food table or a kitchen table, you're not going to want divots like that are going to catch food and everything. So the way that I solve for that is I use a clear epoxy, and I use the West System epoxy, and I'm going to kind of walk you through how I do that. It's actually pretty simple. You do so if you buy the West System kit, the pumps are made so that they calibrate the amount of hardener versus the resin, the part 1 and the part 2, so you don't have to really put a lot of thought into that. You just do one pump of the hardener, one pump of the one pump of the resin, and then one pump of the hardener. And then I mix it in that little white cup with just a scrap piece of wood, and then I'm just going to put it in these holes, and I'm going to make it to where it's kind of bubbling over a little bit, and then I'm going to let that dry overnight, and then I'll come back out and sand them, and then you'll still see it. I certainly don't want to cover up the natural part of the wood. But what you won't have is a place where food can get into, or crumbs or anything like that. So it's a little more sanitary on a kitchen table to do this and to fill in these holes. Okay, so that's what that looks like. I got 2 holes here. They look like wormholes, and they're pretty deep. So I'm going to watch those, and as the epoxy levels off, I'll fill it up with a little bit more. So it's a little bit tedious to do this, but the finished product is a lot better. And like I said, on a kitchen table where there's going to be food, it's worth the extra time to do this. And then you can sand those bubbles off, sand the extra epoxy off with the belt sander. And it doesn't come right off, but it comes off. So nothing about sanding a table this size is easy to do. So this is the bench, and I've cut it down to its final dimensions. And if you remember, I was able to run this through the planer, so the cleanup on this is going to be pretty simple. So I'm going to go ahead and put the edge on this. Now, because it's a bench, and I really don't want these sharp edges there, I'm just going to do a round over. And that's what that bit looks like, and I'll show you what it does and how it works. But I got my router set up. I did a test cut on a scrap piece of wood, and I recommend you do that so you get it set right where you need it to, so you get the edge profile that you want. So do a couple practice cuts first, and take your time with the router. It's a very versatile tool, great tool to have, but you can pretty easily make mistakes with it. So the thing I've learned is to always route the end grain first, and the reason why is in case you get any tear out here, when you do this edge and come down here, it will take care of it, because that edge isn't going to be there. You're going to route that off. But this end grain, especially right there on the edge, will have a tendency to split on you. So do the ends first, and then do your long edge. That's kind of more with the grain. It's not the end grain, because that will not do that tear out at the end. So let's get started. So here's what that bit does. Let me see if I can get a good angle on it. There you go. So it just gives it a nice round edge, and it takes any sharpness off, especially on a bench where you don't want to sit on something sharp. Kind of notice what I did is I took small amounts of material off at each pass, and I didn't try to take the whole depth of the cut with one pass. You're going to get a lot better results when you do that. Alright, so I've made some progress on the table, and I've got it dimensioned to the right size. I've got the chamfer put on it. Let me show you a close-up of what that is. So this is what the chamfer looks like. It's just a 45-degree angle, and you put that on, you know, with your router. Just gives it a little bit of appeal on the edge instead of just having square ends. So for final sanding, I think I've got this to the point where I'm at the final sanding stages. I've got my I use this Porter cable sander, but you guys know that I already went through this thing and over it with the belt sander to get all the rough stuff off. Now essentially what I'm doing is I'm going to work my way up through the grits to get it to its final finish. So this is 150. The belt sander was 120. So this is 150 grit, and then I'll go up from 150 to 220. So another thing I do is I get a light like this, and if you put a light on it, you can really see whether or not you're getting out all those fine scratches from that belt sander. And you can see here, I don't know if you can see that, but we've got a lot of work yet to do. So plan on spending on a table this size, plan on spending a good couple hours minimum sanding this thing down, because it's gonna need it. So I just got done sanding on the table for a couple hours, and when I say a couple, probably about 3 hours. And I haven't even finished the little bench yet. I started on that, but I'm just kind of taking a break from sanding. You can tell it's kind of a dirty job, and but the tabletop is actually good to go. Looks really, really good. Got the edge profile on it. So here is the support for the table. That's completely done. It's all welded. And then I also got the bench all welded up. So everything's coming together well. It's turning out really nice. And I got about probably 2 weeks left, and a lot of finishing work to do and a lot of painting to do on the H-brace and the little bench. Alright, so the next video will be the finishing process that I go through. And I'll show you the finish I use and how I apply it. It's really pretty simple.